lecture with David Horace was 3 years ago. And David and Mark called me one morning and said, let's have breakfast. And I said, is this a solicitation? And he said, no, I just want to talk to you about our foundation. So I said, okay. That's really not what he wanted to talk about. He wanted to talk about me taking out some donor advised funds and as part of the foundation. So after breakfast, I told him, okay, I'd consider taking out a donor advised funds, 3 donor advised funds, one for each one of my adult children. They're 54, 53, and 50, 53 and 50 years old. I said I would do that. And he said, great, and he paid for the breakfast. So after that, when I went back to Atlanta, I sat down with my wife and I told her that I was going to open these 3 donor advised funds. And she said, well, in the name of each child. And she said, well, how do you know they're going to spend the money Jewishly? And I looked at her and I said, well, I don't know. And she said, well, if they're not going to spend it Jewishly, I don't want to do it. I don't want you to do it. So I said, well, what percentage would you like to be Jewish? Because I think there ought to be a percentage of money that's not spent Jewishly, because we want to be community people and we want to take care of others as well as just Jews. And we agreed that 50% or more would be spent Jewishly. So we then talked to Mark Silverman about it, and we drew up a non-legal, but a template letter, whatever, that began to be put with the Federation and with each fund, that 50% or more should be spent Jewishly if these funds are inherited by the children at our passing. Then it occurred to me that why couldn't we do something like a Jewish future pledge that everybody could do with the next generation for charitable resources that they would be leaving through either donor advised funds or wills or testamentary gifts or what have you, that could be spent by the children with their decisions Jewishly and with a minimum amount of 50% or more. And that's how the Jewish Future Pledge was created. After that, Amy Holtz came on board. She's a very significant Jewish person out of Philadelphia who's been involved in the Jewish community for years and years. And Hadara Ishak from Atlanta was hired also. And we have a staff of 3. And we've been going now we're in our 2nd year of promoting the Jewish Future Pledge. We have, and when you'll see the video, it shows what I've done with my children and their commitment. We actually did that at the Passover Seder and then did the video later where I committed to them what I was going to do with the money. And the money is in their hands. And they can recommend from their donor advised funds what they're going to do. And then whatever else is left for charitable purposes at the estate, then 50% or more would be spent Jewishly. Today, we have over 500 signatures of some very significant Jewish leaders around the country. And we're also working on some other aspects of the Jewish Future Pledge involving young people, as well as older people like myself and people younger than I, like Joel Arrighetti, who was one of the first signers of the situation. The key to us is to make sure that there is available funds to support the Jewish community in the diaspora and to support the state of Israel. And we've gotten very, very good feedback from everybody we talk to. Some have never thought about how their charitable resources are going to be spent after they're dead, whatever's left to be spent at that time. And so really it's another opportunity for Jewish people who are committed to the Jewish people in the state of Israel to be able to say to their children and teach their children, counsel their children about what to do with any funds they'll have for charitable purposes. So that's where we are today. And I think it's just more important that anybody on this call actually hears not just what I did, which you'll see in the video, and my children's reaction to that, but to listen to Joel Arrighetti, who was one of the first signers in Atlanta. We have, I think, over 200 signatures in Atlanta. Atlanta, by the way, was a test city for it. because Mark was very committed. He now holds the title of chairman of the Jewish Future Pledge. And he was very committed to the beginning. And I decided, since I'm a resident here, I have been around Atlanta since 1985, and know a lot of people here, that we would start here and experiment with the city to see if, in fact, we could get traction here. There have been a number of announcements coming out about what we're doing. The next one is coming out next week, I believe, with the JFNA in New York, where 10 other federations in the United States are going to run tests in their foundations that they've been identified, also includes Atlanta, with the federation to use as a distribution for our Jewish Future Pledge. So I think that's all I would have to say, unless there's a question that comes up later. But I'd like to turn it over to Joel, because he can actually say how he implemented the pledge, how he signed it, why he signed it, and how it was passed on to his heirs and to the community in which he works in terms of wealth advisors and things of that kind.
Thank you, Mike. We started on this journey about 3 or 4 decades ago. Started off with my parents, who instilled in us the values that we carry on today and pass along to our children. And I remember specifically sitting at the Marcus Jewish Community Center about 18 months ago when Mike gave a presentation to the community about the Jewish Future Pledge. I believe it was the Federation's annual meeting a couple of years ago. And at that time, Mike introduced that to the community for the first time. And I was sitting next to my wife, and both of us looked at each other and said, this is something we need to do, because we had been living the Jewish Future Pledge, but we had not taken the time to actually sit down, talk about it with our children, and commit to do it in writing. So we both signed the pledge, sent it into Federation, and then we committed to have discussions with our children. And our children are between the ages of 28 and 32. And they're adults and they have lives of their own. And I oftentimes hear of them as the next generation, but I really refer to them as the now generation. And I think it's important that you communicate with your children, because not only do they listen to you, but they watch you more than they listen to you. And they look and they observe and they see what you do. It's not just enough to talk the talk, but you've got to walk the walk. And so by signing the pledge, my wife and I took several steps towards this end of creating a Jewish Future Pledge. Was one, talking to our children and telling them why it's important. Second of all, we made some very specific bequests and some charitable gifts that we made both to donor-advised funds, and took advantage of some of the tax laws that are available to us, including naming charities as beneficiaries of our retirement account. And we think that that was important. And I know that later Christy and Larry Fryman will talk a little bit more about specific things. But in my life as a professional advisor, I believe that you've got to communicate with people and let them know why you're doing things. And the values that we hold, family, faith, and friends, align perfectly with the Jewish Future Pledge. And for that reason, Mike, I committed to do it, and I committed to be an ambassador of this program. And wherever I go, both personally and professionally, I try to help educate people and have conversations. And I don't view this as a static, one-time opportunity to have conversations with your children and eventual grandchildren. I believe it's an opportunity that we have to continuously have that communication.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Joel. I think that really says it. I think what you found and I have found is that lots of people that I talk to are actually amazed that they didn't think of doing it, talking to their children about their charitable situations and what they're doing, particularly Jewishly. They'll have a Passover Seder or a Rosh Hashanah dinner or a break the fast on Yom Kippur, or they'll have a sukkah, or they'll do all these kinds of things, but they don't end up having a conversation about what's going to happen later. And so that's, you're doing that, and your next generation will do their share for the Jewish people when the time comes, I'm certain. Thank you.
Mike, I think you're spot on with that. Is a lot of us, we give charitably, and many of us give anonymously. Others give where there is some public recognition of it. But I think that there is a little bit of a human tendency to be private about it, and to take the time at the right time in the right place. And I think that one thing that professionals can do, for those that are out there, both as donors and professionals listening to us today, I mean, there are ways and age-appropriate ways to communicate with your children. You'd obviously have a different conversation with a 10 or 15-year-old than you would with a 30 or 35-year-old, or with a 50-year-old, because they can understand different aspects of both the philosophy of giving and the purposes of giving and the communal benefits of giving. Mike, I remember hearing you tell stories at a very young age of the blue box that your parents had when you were a very young child, and no matter how poor or modest means you were when you were a young child, your family always made an effort to contribute to that. And that struck with me because our family also had that blue box in our kitchen. And we always made it a point of contributing to it and taking that blue box to Sunday school and contributing it to various causes. And I think that that instilled in us a legacy of giving. And I think that's important. And that's an important lesson that you can have. And Mike, you're blessed to have both children and grandchildren who are capable of understanding, receiving, and working on that message. And I'd like to hear from you what some of the things that you've been doing to help promote the Atlanta Jewish Legacy Program.
Well, of course, that you're going to hear Life and Legacy coming up after us, and you'll see in the video, assuming it's going to come up as soon as I stop talking, what my kids are saying about it. I think you'll feel very comfortable about the situation. And we want to start a movement around the United States and Canada, and we're actually getting inquiries already from England and from other countries around the world who are seeing our responses on our social media campaign that we're doing. And there is a website, as everybody knows, for the JewishFuturePledge.org. There is a full marketing plan that we're working out of Los Angeles to promote the Jewish Future Pledge, and it is a moral commitment for Jewish people. We say this is not a legalized commitment, it's a moral commitment, and it only works if the people who sign talk to their children, explaining them why, and follow up. And already I can only tell you one story. My son and I support an organization in Scotland for a Jewish cultural center at Edinburgh, Scotland. It's kind of a strange grant that I have. And I took my son there a couple of years ago, and he called me and he said, I want to give a donation out of my DonorAdvised Fund to the Edinburgh Jewish Cultural Center. And that really put tears in my eyes, because basically I know it's already starting to work. And I think we can all do that, and we have to do it. So I appreciate, Joel, your help and anybody you talk to. And I think, Christy, we've talked enough for, I don't think 20 minutes, but we're available for any questions later. And I hope the video can work because it tells the whole story.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to send the videos when we do our follow-up email with that. So we'll work on it in the meantime. But you know what? One of the things that you all said that was so important is talking to your family. And that's really what we try to do at the Atlanta Jewish Foundation with our fund holders, is really give them the tools, give them the availability of our expertise to come in and have those conversations between the generations, and really let that legacy and those values go down the generations. And you know, how do you do that, and how do you have those conversations can be really hard for people, but you know, we really see that having those conversations can bring the family, you know, really closer together, and you know, get those generations doing things together that they may not have done in the past. So our next segment is on life and legacy. So we have Howard Katz, who was the former chair of our advisory board here at the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, and has now taken on another leadership role with Life and Legacy here in Atlanta. He's going to let you all know a little bit about the Life and Legacy program and how you can be a part of that. So Howard.
Awesome. Thanks. Mike, Great job with what you're doing. Sorry we didn't get the video going, but thank you so much for joining us today and for all you're doing in the Jewish community. The Jewish Future Pledge is going to be hugely impactful for Jews all across the world for generations to come, for certain. I have signed the pledge. I know with Mike and Mark leading the charge, a lot more people are going to do so as well. So, Mike, we wish you lots and lots of success. We thank you for your efforts. And personally, I want you to know that we are here for you. And our Life and Legacy team here in Atlanta stands at the ready to help the Jewish Future Pledge. Anybody that you have that has signed the pledge that would like to use some of those dollars, not just for the one-time use by the charity, but also to create an ongoing future stream of income that will go to their favorite charities on a go-forward basis, you let us know. We can help them get it done. And that's really what the Life and Legacy program is all about, folks. In a nutshell, over the long term, we are trying to get a portion of the operating expenses covered each year for your favorite charities. Somewhere in the range of 25 to 35% to help those charities survive and thrive in the years to come. And the good news is there's a bunch of really easy ways to do it. So if you're interested, or any of your clients for the advisors on here are interested, please let us know. We are happy to help. We're happy to speak to them or you or their advisors or any of you on this call to help navigate the various ways to set those up and to help you set it up if you need it. And additionally, through the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, we can help you navigate the landscape of the charities that you might choose from too. More specifically, you can work with Christy and the growing Atlanta Jewish Foundation team to help both with the various ways to give, from the real simple to the most complex, as well as where you might give. But not only to honor your pledge, but also to best engage your charitable passions. Lots of ways to give. There's lots of places to give. The foundation team are experts in both. So give Christy an email if you have questions on any of that. And if you have questions on the Life and Legacy program, which I'm about to describe to you in greater detail, I want you to email Rachel Rosner, rrosner@jewishatlanta.org. We have a chat line. Maybe somebody could put that up there for us. But I basically just explained the Life and Legacy program. Let me give you a few more details on it. But this is a national program we're participating in with the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. It's active in more than 30 cities currently, helping everybody from regular everyday people on up to our captains of industry and philanthropy, helping them leave a small portion, sometimes larger ones, of a retirement plan or a life insurance policy, or in your will or a trust, or even a small part of your donor advised fund. Leave that to an endowment to help cover part of the charity's annual expenses on a go-forward basis. So think back to this year. Imagine how much less stressful it would have been with a reliable stream of income, completely independent of any door receipts like donations or membership or event revenue. Right? All of these forms of revenue for our charities suffer from time to time. This year was really unique, to say the least, about this year, because things dried up in an instant. But we have business recessions every few years. We have major market pullbacks every few years. The tax law changes every few years. And any of these things can cause donations and memberships to decline, sometimes significantly. Anybody remember the financial crisis? That put a lot of our charities in stress. So at the end of the day, every charity that you have worked hardest for over the years, they are all reliant on the kindness of others continuing year after year. And their ability to support us can be influenced by any number of outside events. Additionally, demographics aren't helping us much either. People are affiliating less, all faiths, it's not just Jewish. Churches are suffering from declining membership, just like synagogues. People just aren't belonging as much as they used to. And they're giving differently too. Federated giving is not as attractive to our younger generations. They're looking for more direct input. They want to change the world with their dollars. And it leads to one really stark point. It has been estimated that if a charity does not have 25% of their annual budget coming in each year through legacy programs like we are discussing, that they face extinction in the coming decade. So that's the goal of this program. Over the long term, we're targeting getting each organization something like 25 to 35% of their annual expenses covered each year. It eases stress, It helps ensure the long-term viability of the charity, and importantly, it helps them provide more good back into the community. So I want to take a minute or two to explain the organizations involved with running it, just so you know who the players are and how we all work together. I mentioned it's brought to us by the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. It is very generously underwritten here locally by the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta. They're footing the bill for the staff, the marketing, and all the time commitments involved, and trust me, it is a lot. And they are also, by the way, a participating organization. So if anyone wants to establish this type of a legacy gift for the Federation, we can help you do that too. But finally, the program is being run on a day-to-day basis by the Atlanta Jewish Foundation team. And as I mentioned before, Rachel Rosner is spearheading our efforts of coordinating, frankly, some days cajoling our participating organizations. But Rachel and Christy and the rest of their team, with me riding shotgun as chairman, are organizing and helping and coaching more than a dozen charities to build a sustainable legacy giving program. And we're going to focus on long-term sustainability during my time at the helm. We just started year 3. After a really incredible end to the second year, we picked up almost 100 letters of intent in the final month or so. This program is really beginning to break into its stride in terms of building awareness and achieving results here locally. But again, long-term sustainability is the key, because we have all seen these types of programs come and go over the years. They start out with a bang and then they kind of wither away, right? Like a garden that nobody has tended to. But that's the beauty of this program that the Harold Grinspoon Foundation created. We are tending to this garden together, year in and year out. It's a community garden, if you will, and it's a long-term plan. It's a group of organizations that are working together, that are learning from one another, that are challenging one another. We're working together on community-wide messaging plus their own. They're working together on community-wide recognition events and their own. And we are building a culture of thanking people and recognizing them also on a go-forward basis, and continuing to nurture and to grow our community garden together, which that's the exact goal of the program that the Harold Grinspoon Foundation brought. In each of the more than 30 cities where it's operating, we all pretty much operate like a franchise, which I say it's in high regard. Something like 95% of franchises succeed because they've built a successful system, and all you've got to do is follow the dang manual. And we are following the manual, my friends. The manual says the first 2 years we were focused on getting our initial letters of intent from folks, basically stating their intention to figure it out. Some point in the next year or two, they're going to figure out how to leave a legacy at the charities that he or she cares most about. So I want to reiterate that. You don't have to know how, you don't have to know when you're going to do it when you sign the letter of intent, just that you're intending to. For my Southern friends on this call, that you're fixing to. And more than 450 times since we started this program 2 years ago, people have said, I'll figure it out. Plus, hundreds of more times from the Create a Jewish Legacy program more than a decade ago. So we're going to continue to cultivate them as well in the coming years. And again, here's what the manual says. This is what you're going to see from us in years 3 and 4. The program will mature a little bit. Over the next 2 years, we will continue to grow the letters of intent. We've got to continue to do that. But we'll also have a strong focus on formalization. That's the term they use, of having the donors actually put in place the plan to get it done, and then confirming with us that they've done it. So for the advisors on the call, we can work with you on that too. If you'll let us know it's done, we don't have to know the details, though it's really helpful later in life. But if you'll confirm with us that your client has done it, that works for us too. And that's going to be one of the key areas of focus over the next 2 years, and you'll see more from us for those that have already signed, and that's formalization, taking your intention and formalizing it, actually putting it into effect. While at the same time, we are going to continue to spread the word and find other people that care enough about these organizations to help prepare them for the future. With your help, the Atlanta Jewish Foundation will continue to coach these organizations and hopefully others to work with their longtime donors, to work with their longtime volunteers and their longtime professionals, among others, establishing a legacy gift in his or her name, which continues year after year. And if you want, for you to be recognized year after year, so that your name lives on at these organizations too, or so that you continue to lead by example at these organizations or for your family year after year. And in doing so, you help to solidify not just the organization, but your legacy at the charities that you have worked hardest for over the years. And that is what the Life and Legacy is all about. Helping everybody and anybody easily leave a small part of a retirement plan or a life insurance policy or in your will or a trust or your donor advised fund, as well as other methods, to your favorite charity or charities. I'm going to repeat that in a second for anybody taking notes, but I want you to understand most anybody can do this. Most people can leave 5 to 10% of their 401k or 403b or IRA to charity. Their family's still going to get 90 to 95% of it, plus everything else you've accumulated. Your family is going to be fine, but without your help, the charities won't be. So let me repeat those. The 5 easiest way to do it: small beneficiary percentage on a retirement plan, a life insurance policy, in your will, in a trust, or from your donor advised fund. And if you think about what I just said, several of those you can do online, 30 minutes or less, guaranteed. Hop online to your 401k website, change the beneficiary. So if you are hearing this and you're thinking, yeah, I could do that, or yeah, I've got clients that would want to do that, we're going to send you as a follow-up to this meeting our fillable PDF. Again, so it's super easy for you to do it, just as you intend to at some point in the next couple of years figure it out. So please be on the lookout for that in the next day or two. And then feel free to share it with anyone and everyone you'd like. All comers, all net worth, all income levels. You and your clients and your family and your friends can use this to state your intention to create a legacy gift. And again, you don't have to know how you're going to do it. You don't have to know when you're going to do it. Just that at some point in the next year or two that you'll figure it out. It's really easy and you got plenty of time to do it. And if your client prefers, they can contact any of the participating organizations directly and work with them, or call us. Whatever works for you works for us. So that's the program. We're going to field some questions at the end, but in closing, I want to tell you what I love most about the letter of intent that we're going to send you, but also about the Jewish Future Pledge. And it can best be summed up by a comment from Emmett Smith in his Hall of Fame induction ceremony. He said, and I quote him, "You turn a dream into a goal when you write it down." This is you writing it down. This is you and your clients and your friends and family turning their good intentions into a goal. I have signed both of these documents personally. These are now goals for me, and I don't know about y'all, but I am goal-oriented. This will get done. So we hope each of you will join us in taking care of those charities that are nearest and dearest to your hearts. And that, my friends, is the Life and Legacy program. So we thank you for your time. We'll take Q&A, and now I think it's on to Christy and Larry.
Great. Thank you so much, Howard. We're really excited to be a part of this Life and Legacy program. And it's really important that we build some endowment in Atlanta. I always say Atlanta is a major gift town. We can build a building, we can raise a capital. We have a real hard problem raising endowment. So thank you to Life and Legacy for really making us focus on this in the upcoming years. It's crucial to the success and sustainability of our organizations here in Atlanta. So Larry and I are going to talk a little bit about some opportunities for this year, as well as kind of how, the Jewish Future Pledge and Life and Legacy conversations kind of happen on that advisor side. Larry and I are lucky enough to share a fund holder and client in common who brought up the Jewish Future Pledge to Larry, and he was like, "What is this? What do I do with this? How do we figure this out? How do we make this happen?" And so, Larry and I got a chance to talk and, discuss it, and I made him come on this webinar to talk about it. So Larry,
I'm glad to be.
Exactly. So how do you kind of approach that philanthropic conversation? What were your first kind of thoughts when, someone brought up the Jewish Future Pledge to you?
Well, I'd say first, I'm happy to be here and appreciate the opportunity. And I want to tell Howard I really appreciate him bringing up the fellow Gator, Emmett Smith, and his closing there. The philanthropic conversation, Christy, I would say that I actually start it before I actually meet with a client. And what I mean by that is we have a pre-meeting questionnaire we send out to clients, and among other things in there is a list of priorities. And among those priorities that we pre-populate is the idea of charitable giving. So we ask the question before we even sit down, and occasionally, that will be indicated as high priority. Sometimes it's not. And then the conversation is just about what's important when I'm sitting across the table from them. And one of the ways in which where a client hasn't indicated clearly that charity is important to them, one of the ways in which I can elicit that is by asking them the question in a different way. I would commonly ask, is there a limit on what you might want to leave to your children? And it may be a curious question to the client to begin with, but it may then and often does lead to the dialogue about, well, what do you mean by that? And I can introduce the idea of philanthropy and see where the client goes with it from there. So that's a pretty common way that I bring it up.
Yeah, we see that a lot too with our fund holders, that they're trying to figure out how much is enough for their children. They don't want them spoiled, but they want them to not have to
Right.
really worry about things. And what's that dollar amount? And it's really hard to gauge for people, and hard to have those conversations. And that's something that we talk about a lot with our fund holders as they're going through that whole process of talking, especially about philanthropy, because that's where the money is going to go if it's not going to go to the children usually. So
Right.
how important is that philanthropy, and how do you really want to actualize that philanthropy as well? So tell me a little bit kind of about your conversation with our mutual friend around the Jewish Future Pledge.
Well, it was more of me getting educated than a conversation I was leading. It was very educational. What was not uncommon about the process was bringing philanthropy into an estate plan and ensuring that I did my work as the estate planning attorney in drafting documents that included the precise way in which charitable giving was going to be wired in, if you will. But what I didn't realize at the time was underpinning that was in fact the Jewish Future Pledge. So in a little bit after the fact, I became educated on the Jewish Future Pledge and its import, and it became just very clear to me pretty quickly how that concept can be something that I bring to the table for my clients when they've indicated a desire to include philanthropy, charitable giving, and when I've got a sense that they're interested in supporting Jewish causes as part of that.
Yeah, exactly. So when the Jewish Future Pledge first came about last year when I was starting at the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, my first question is, well, this is wonderful, but how do you actualize it? How do you make it happen? Intentions are great, but we really need to ensure that, these instructions and these desires are followed through. So what we have done is built a product around that called the Legacy Fund. And the Legacy Fund really allows you to create a fund with some guardrails around it for your children or grandchildren that ensures that half or whatever percentage you want goes to Jewish causes through that fund. So that's a really new thing that we have, and we'll send out more information about that in the follow-up email as well. But, I think a lot of our role as the foundation is to make sure that these are actualized. And that it does happen, much like Life and Legacy, that, those letters of intent actually turn into actual endowment gifts as well. So let's take a little turn from Life and Legacy and Jewish Future Pledge. We're reaching the end of the year. It's been a crazy year. I don't think we've seen the end of crazy for this year, as we kind of go into an election cycle and all those other things that, can usually lead to a lot of changes in tax law and how we do things. So what do you really see as some opportunities as we are ending the year for charitable giving and really to maximize that?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't start out by talking about some time-limited opportunities that exist that came out of some legislation really right back at the start of the pandemic. It's called the CARES Act. And in this law are some specific targeted charitable giving provisions, one of which is for individuals who don't itemize. They can still deduct up to $300 of charitable giving this year as part of this law. But for those taxpayers, those individuals that itemize deductions, there's a very generous aspect of this new law, which allows for a charitable deduction of up to 100% of adjusted gross income. It's only for 2020. It's only for cash contributions to public charities. So a donor-advised fund wouldn't qualify, but that's time limited. That's going to be around until the end of this calendar year. So that's something that I think folks ought to be aware of. And those that have businesses, they should know that there's an increase in the amount of a corporate, the amount that a corporation can deduct for cash contributions as well, from 10% up to 25%. Again, time limited before the end of this calendar year. So I think that's something that is important for folks to know, Christy.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what we're talking about with our fund holders and other people who come to us about that unlimited charitable deduction on cash gifts is this is an ideal time to set up that restricted fund or that endowment fund with that cash gift, since it can't go into a donor-advised fund or supporting organization or private foundation. This is a really great opportunity to kind of accelerate that before you're done. It's much nicer for people to give during their lifetime than they get to experience it, which is a really huge and important part of philanthropy, I think.
One other quick planning tip on that, Christy, which is it's a great opportunity because of this to look at perhaps converting a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. The conversion of that will generate a lot of taxable income based on the value of the IRA, but with the unlimited ability to make a cash charitable donation this year and deduct it against income, you can fully offset the income caused by that conversion. So that's an opportunity, again, that keys into this new CARES Act.
Exactly. And, there's still the opportunity around called, we call it PCD or IRA charitable rollover for those 70 and a half or older to, give up to $100,000 from their IRA to public charities, again, not to donor-advised funds supporting boards or private foundations. But, that's another way for people to really kind of accelerate their charitable giving, especially if they don't need a required minimum distribution from their IRA as well. Some of those numbers changed this year, but you can still do the charitable portion at age 70 and a half, even though you're not required to take the required minimum distribution until you're 72. So, another kind of opportunity to really kind of accelerate that charitable giving. For limited time period.
Even though the required minimum distribution was actually waived for this year with the CARES Act, it still may make sense to go ahead and do that for the folks that don't really need the required minimum distribution in the first place, to reduce that IRA with the charitable donation so they can lower those required minimum distributions in future years.
Exactly. So what about some estate planning? I mean, this is a really kind of uncertain time.
Right.
I think most of the advisors on this call remember 2010 and sleeping on the sofa at the end of the year because of the uncertainty around what was happening with the estate tax or no estate tax as it came to be. So, what are your thoughts right now about that?
Well, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty, but one of the things that there's a keen awareness of is that if there is, in fact, a change in the controlling party in Washington, that tax legislation is going to change along with it, and likely the exemptions that we have from estate tax and gift tax, those likely will then go down from what are probably high watermark levels in the history of the 100-year-old tax. What's now $11.5 million of exemption could drop to half or even less than half of that. So that is definitely a constant conversation I'm having with clients who are looking to avail themselves of some wealth transfer this year before those exemptions go down. And transfers this year can be grandfathered. Transfers after this year would be uncertain. So that's something that everyone ought to keep in mind. And I think there's some opportunities to make some strategic giving this year, and to tie into that some interesting combinations with charitable giving, something like a charitable lead trust. While the interest rate environment is really low, and we have uncertainty in the future exemptions, that's a way to couple together philanthropy and wealth transfer planning simultaneously.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked to a lot of people about charitable lead trusts going into a donor-advised fund, which kind of offers the unlimited flexibility of how you really take those dollars and put them to use for charity. And anybody on this call, if anybody's talked to you about setting up a charitable lead trust, now is the time to do it. It is, so advantageous. It's a no-brainer for a lot of people right now as well. So one of the things we've seen too is that there's a lot of increase in business sales, business transitions, all of that throughout the year. And, it's really important for people to know that that's a wonderful opportunity for people to really, build a philanthropic fund through that sale of that business. If you donate pre-sale business assets or interest, to a donor-advised fund or some other philanthropic vehicle, it can be really a tax-advantaged way to, build that philanthropic fund for the future.
Absolutely. And that's worth reinforcing that in the right circumstances, giving away some equity before a sale of a business would have a good combination effect of defraying some of the income tax on the sale, as well as supercharging a philanthropic vehicle for the business owner.
Exactly. So any other final tips as we kind of wind this down and see if there's any questions?
I don't think so. I think we've covered sort of the hot ones that I would bring to the table at this point in time, and I'm happy to answer questions if we get to that.
Yeah, and I would just say, as we kind of wrap this up on this side, is that, really look, especially if you're, raising money, or if you are an organization, or even if you're a philanthropist and a donor, really look at giving assets as opposed to income. It can be a really great way, tax advantaged way to give, as well as really, maximize what you're able to give for philanthropy. So always think first of giving from assets rather than from income, which is always my suggestion to everybody that I talk to as well. So we're going to open it up for questions. If anybody has a question, thank you, Elliot, for your comment in the chat. We appreciate it as well. Glad to have you as signers, you and your wife.
I still have a question. I think that the number of folks on this call have donor advised funds, and you mentioned earlier about how do you communicate and memorialize your Jewish Future Pledge and then translate that into your life and legacy giving. Talk a little bit more about that, because I think that that's something that for many of us that have the Donor Advised Fund, it's something that we could do fairly easily if we have the tools or the knowledge as to what we need to do.
Exactly, and there's a couple of ways to do it. One is the easiest way to do it, and just tell your family that's what you want done. It doesn't have any legally binding ramifications. You hope and trust that your family does what you want them to do, which is not always what happens, but you know, depending on your family, it's, you know, it's up to you. The other thing that we've done is we've created this product called the Legacy Fund, and I like to call it a donor advised fund with guardrails. So this allows your children or grandchildren, whoever's going to be advising on that donor advised fund, to be flexible in their giving up to a certain point. And one of those points could be, you know, how do you legalize that Jewish Future Pledge? So every year, half of those gifts that they make or grants that they make out of that fund have to be to Jewish organizations. And we as a foundation work with the family, work with those advisors to make sure that that happens every year. So I think that's a great way for people to do that and really be assured that their intentions are coming out. And that legacy fund can be used around anything, not necessarily the Jewish Future Pledge. If they want all their grant making to stay in Atlanta, or if they want all their grant making to stay in a certain interest area, such as human services, or gifts to organizations that send kids to, you know, Israel, whatever kind of guardrails they want around that future philanthropy they can do.
So that's really effective, Christy. So connecting the dots, someone can leave through their estate plan a specified amount or percentage to their legacy fund.
Yeah.
And the specifics around the guardrails, as you describe it, can be handled outside of the will, and in the actual document for the legacy fund, giving the donor the ability to go back and to revisit that and to change that without the formality of having to go back and modify a will, which I think is a great way to handle that.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's the perfect way to do it. You know, a lot of people, as you've seen, get hung up on, you know, how do I divide this up into different charities and things like that? And it can hang up the signing process for these estate planning documents for years, I've seen. And so, you know, relegating that decision to, not necessarily a decision, but, you know, saying, okay, we're going to use a fund at the Atlanta Jewish Foundation to facilitate our legacy giving, really simplifies things for both the estate planning attorney as well as your client. All right, so I don't see any questions. Thank you all so much for staying on this webinar. Any questions as well, you know, you may have in the future, please don't hesitate to contact us. We'll be sending you a follow-up email that will have Mike's video in it. It will also have direct links to Jewish Future Pledge. It'll have the form for Life and Legacy. It'll have all of our speakers' information on it as well, so that you can reach out to contact them if you have a direct question as well. And this is being recorded for all those people who couldn't come at this specific time, and will be on our website. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Larry, Joel, Howard, Mike, for doing this with us. We hope to do this a lot more in the future, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.